time to get your fix. Come on down, get your horrible gaming review. 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 Wow.
Hello, my name is Zachariah with Old Man Gaming. Welcome to another horrible game review. I'm very excited about this one. I've been doing a couple indie games here and there, and this is probably not going to get us the most views, but this was just a small indie game that launched. It was developed by 3 people, and I just felt the need to do a review on this. But before we get into that, of course, we got to do our normal disclaimers. Number 1, the word horrible in the title of this content does not necessarily refer to the game or DLC that I am reviewing, but much more the actual video itself. What I do here is snap judgment reviews. I get 5 to 10 hours with the game, and I'm trying to give you a quick overview of what you're in for right off the bat. That, coupled with the fact that I believe video games are one of the most subjective forms of art, I will not be giving a score to this review. Instead, I will tell you the overview of what the game is. I'll tell you the pros of the game and the cons of the game, in my point of view, as all reviews are, and then I will tell you whether I will be sticking with the game outside the purpose of this review or not. So that out of the way, I am reviewing Buccaneers! Just Buccaneers. For PC, it's only on PC right now. I got it through Steam. They had a small sale when they released. It was only $15. It's made by 3 people. So what is this game? Well, it's kind of a pirate simulator. I wouldn't say super in-depth. Basically what they did is they took polygon assets, kind of Minecraft-style assets almost, and then they made a pirate game from the ground up with it. An immersive pirate game where you captain ships, you raid other people, you raid forts. But what's interesting to this is it's actually more about faction management than it is really about just the 7 seas and raiding and pillaging. There is a story to this. You're immediately put into a tutorial where most of the abilities you have are already unlocked. You already have a nice ship, you basically go through this tutorial. This tutorial sets up the game where you basically get double-crossed after it takes you through everything you have, basically everything the game has to offer. You do a ship battle, you do a boarding fight, you do a island raid where you take out a fort, and then of course you get double-crossed. You get double-crossed by this kind of anti-pirate named Diego Salvador. I'm not gonna spoil anything, but basically you end up this free man with just a crew and a small ship that you steal. With that being said, you then get to choose who you work for. Now you have a couple of different factions. You have the Buccaneers, which is a pirate faction, a group dedicated to piracy. Then you have the French, you have the British, and you have the Spanish. And then, of course, the captain that you're playing immediately vows vengeance on Diego Salvador for everything he did to you. So you get to go join a faction, and then you get to start doing stuff for that faction. You get to do stuff in a multitude of ways. First, there's the overarching storyline where you're trying to build up to taking on Diego Salvador, where you're working for a governor that's handing you out missions to kind of get you further and further close to that. There are also bounty missions in every city that you land on, which basically will reward you for taking out enemy ships. Or other such things. And then there are some other hidden missions around the world. Like I found a smuggling mission right before I did this review, which was interesting, where basically you find a smuggler at night. He basically wants you to sneak into a hostile city to get some money for it. Stuff like that. So when you're in the overworld, it kind of bobbles between you being in the captain's quarters, where you then select an overworld, then you see this overmap, and then it kind of like fast travel moves you to the place. As it does, you have a chance for random encounters and the like, which you can attempt to run from or fight. Then whenever you're going to your destination and doing whatever mission you are. You can also sail there manually if you want. There is a way to start elapsing time more expediently when sailing. But for the most part, you're going to go to the captain's thing, go there, and then the sailing itself is going to be when you're in fights. That's really when you're going to be sailing. Now, the fights go, you have three different types of ammo, and they're available to all ships right off the bat. And those ammos are just normal cannonballs, then you have this like masked killer, and then you have like a grape shot, which kills enemy troops. Interestingly enough, the way the cannons load are very realistic. So you have cannons on either side. They start loading at the same time. If you switch the ammo, they have to reload. And if you fire one side, the other side remains loaded until you fire it. Now, depending on which way you tilt your camera, is which way you're commanding to fire. And then there's kind of these like arc lines, I suppose is the best way to say, that give you a good idea of what you're going to hit and whether you're going to hit and stuff like that. The masked killers take out masts of enemy ships, which you have to do in order to board them. The cannonballs just damage the hull of the opponent's ship if you're trying to sink it, and then the grape shot reduces opponent troop counts, which can hurt all manner of things. It can make it easier to take them out during a board because you have the upper hand with more troops, or you can actually make it harder for them to do their task because how fast cannons get loaded, ships get repaired, steering happens, how fast all that happens is reliant on the amount of crew that you have on the ship. One thing I was very surprised to see in here is it actually has a close combat system. And there are basically three weapons in the game. There is a rapier and a pistol. Then there is a big old rifle that can take the place of the rapier and pistol. The rifle dealing more damage at range, obviously being hard to load and with no melee options. The pistol does a significant amount of damage and is ranged, but its accuracy is a little bit weaker. And then, of course, your rapier has the melee damage down. There's also a parry button and a parry system, which is a little hard to get used to at first, just because it's polygon because of the nature of it. It's a little bit harder to understand when the timing is, but I started to get it fairly quickly into the game, so I'm not even going to list that as a con, really. When boarding, you take out the enemy captain, you claim the ship, period. Other ships can board you if they take your mast down. If your mast is down, you can repair it. I'm getting a little too in-depth in this, but they definitely have a good amount of depth in this game. You can also buy new ships from a shipwright. There's also three different perk trees that you unlock as you level up your character, which is also an interesting level of depth that I like. And each one of these perks, they don't just give static bonuses or minus, they actually unlock something in the game. Like, if you want a second ship in your fleet, you have to unlock that perk. If you want to be able to capture opponent ships, you have to unlock that perk. Stuff like that. There are a couple of static mods, but for the most part, they actually unlock options in the game, and I thought that was very interesting. Of course, when you take out a ship or you take out an opponent, you get a number of loot that you can sell, and really that's the grind of this, is getting loot, bringing it back, selling it, getting bigger ships, getting further in the game. Rinse, repeat here. Again, very interesting stuff. I didn't get too far in the story because the combat is actually a little bit tough. It's very hard to take out opponents with better ships than you, as it would be, I would assume, in real life. But it is also melee combat. Like, took a little bit to get used to, and sometimes it's a little bit hard to understand what I'm supposed to be doing. But that's the game. That's the game in a nutshell. So is it good or is it bad? Let's get into the pros and cons of this. And of course, I like to go pros first. I always like to go positive first. And first thing I really liked about this is the freedom of how you play it. While there isn't a ton of meat on this bone, and we'll talk about it later, where you go and what you do is really up to you once you get through the tutorial. The tutorial is long, another thing we're going to talk about later, but I do like the aspects that you can go into. I like that there is a stealth aspect to this game as well, like that's possible. I like the idea that you can, take out enemies with boarding, or you could just sink the ship. I like that. And although this really feels like trading punches at first, once you really get into the combat, I found it very interesting. You can really get some strategic moments out of it. Just a good example, I was taking on a ship that was taking me down, but I managed to drop its mast as I dropped my mast, but I it was not in a shooting solution. I was able to repair my ship just enough to inch forward so that it could never get a shooting solution on me, grape shot it until its people were low, then move into board. So it definitely makes kind of moment to moment gameplay very interesting in the battles, and it is not easy. There was another battle where I was taking on a level 2 heavy sloop, just the level above my ship. I had another ship of the same level with me, and we could not beat this thing. It beat us every time. So there is some trickiness to it. One other thing I really liked was how a lot of the monetary stuff works, especially with buying upgrades to the ship. Every ship has a load of upgrades available to it. Depending on the ship size, is how many upgrades you can have installed in each different slot. For cannons, for hulls, for masts, the whole 9 yards. What I really liked here is that when you first buy the upgrade, it costs a ton of money because you have to buy basically the technology, then you have to pay them to install it. However, once you've bought that, you only have to pay to install it from that point on, which really helps out because once you get through that tutorial, it we're going to talk about the tutorial and the cons, but it is a hard wall where you are all of a sudden powerless, and the amount of money you have is very low. So it was very nice to get that little bonus that once I get this, I don't have to spend as much money for it, which is nice. All right, let's move into cons. All right, my biggest con, without a question, is going to be the tutorial. And don't get me wrong, it definitely shows you how to play. It does what it's supposed to do. It's a tutorial. However, it's long. It's long and it's a bit drawn out. You can't just motor through it like most tutorials. In fact, so much so that I kind of felt like, this is just the game. And then all of a sudden the tutorial ended. So not only is it long, but then when it ends, it kind of starts you at 0, and it hasn't prepared you to be started at 0. You have no money, no combat abilities as your ship. It's just such a hard drop off that I think it kind of works counterintuitively to the tutorial itself, which is supposed to teach you how to play this game. But this teaches you how to play the game basically if you're already super powerful, which you're not going to be right off the bat. It never teaches you how to deal with all of a sudden not being good. The other thing is, it does take you through everything. Everything from fort captures to ship battles to everything. But again, to even sneaking. But again, once you're done with it, it's like, hard stop. My next con is kind of the emptiness of the world. And this is kind of a temporary con because they've already worked on this game. They've already added a bunch of patches and even a couple of new features, including a ship you can use as your flagship that you couldn't before. So that being said, I don't believe that they're cutting support for this game anytime soon. In fact, I think it's going to only get better. This is what I like to call the best foundation. And the best games out there take a great foundation and build a mansion on it. And I think right now you're playing the foundation, but the mansion is still in progress. And I think that's something we need to remember. We also need to keep in mind that this is a 3-person team that has done an amazing job. Really, in my personal opinion. So that being said, that caveat in place, the empty world is a little tricky because every city you go to, I would say maybe 50% of the townsfolk have little boxes over their head you could talk to them. I was really excited by this. I was really excited with the options. Maybe these would all have storyline quests or side quests or whatever. Unfortunately, none of them say anything of use except maybe 1 or 2. Like if you find the smuggler, he gives you a smuggling mission. I'm sure there's probably a couple of other weird side missions that you can find from talking to them. But most of them say the same 3 levels of dialogue over and over again. I feel like that's just a waste. Like somebody took a lot of time to program in all these townspeople that talk, and then none of them say anything of any note. I almost feel like this is a placeholder. Like these characters are slowly going to have side content added to them. That's what I'm hoping anyway. But it's just kind of weird. Like you end up going into this game feeling very like, there's so much massive open world here. And then realize there really isn't that much massive open world. It's a bone with not as much meat as you thought it was. That being said, I think there's plenty of room to get that meat. There's plenty of room for this game to improve. and really become awesome. With that, my final con is the lack of ability to command your other ships. And this is also going to come with a caveat, as I don't necessarily feel like in the moment you could really change this, but basically when you go into a fight, you have no control over your other ship fleets. Like the ship that you picked as your flagship, that's what you're on. That's what you get to control. You don't get to issue commands to any other ships in your fleet. They just work on whatever they're working on. So if they go for the mast, if they go grape shot, that's all on them. If they decide to board the ship that you're taking out before you board it, that's on them too. And I can't count the number of times I got a ship captured or sunk, not because of my stupidity, but because of the other captain's stupidity. I do like that the ship AI will board you eventually, sometimes, or they'll just pepper you. They have a wide range of things that the other ships will do that kept me guessing in combat. But when you're playing and you have no control over your secondary captains, it's a little frustrating. There was a few times where I was like, man, I wish I was just one ship. I could have actually done this battle, but I couldn't. I failed it because I had a second ship. And that, I never want to feel like that. It's very frustrating. Obviously, the caveat here is if you're going for simulation, there was no way for these captains in a fleet to really be able to talk to each other at the time. I mean, there's some weird, they did some flagging and some hand gestures back in the day, but honestly, there wasn't a whole lot of way. They didn't have like two-way communicators or anything. So I kind of get it from that perspective. But on that level, I should be able to basically hire the captain in my fleet that I want there. Like, if I want my captain to be more passive and let me do more of the fighting, I should be able to hire a captain that does that more often. Kind of almost tailor make it. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't do unpredictable stuff here and there, but I should still have some sort of control over the secondary ships in my fleet. Even if it's a passive one that happens long before the battle even starts, just give me something. Because there's just too many times where the ships just do everything counter what you're trying to accomplish. And that's a little frustrating. I do want to give one more final postscript postscript pro that I forgot in the initial area, but I really enjoyed the music here. Don't get me wrong, there's not a lot of it. There's only a few tracks, but it actually, the one track is slightly changed based on whose territory you're in. So if you're in the pirate place, the pirate track is very straightforward piratey. But then if you go to the French, they kind of put this extra little French on it. Same with the British, same with the Spanish, and I thought that was really cool. That was a really nice touch when I noticed it, so I want to give it a shout out. As far as whether or not I'm going to stick with it, for the most part, yes, I am going to stick with it. I enjoy this game, and I'm definitely going to be checking back in to see what kind of stuff they add to it. I think this is a great foundation. I think the mansion here is going to be beautiful once it's finished. It's just not done yet. I do want to say that it is still right for them to release it. If they had put this in early access, it would be in early access for the rest of their lives, and that's no fun. I think this game is also a bargain for what it is. $15? I definitely got $15 worth out of it. So I'm definitely going to recommend anyone to go play this. As far as sticking with it, again, right now, this year is absolutely chock full of some of the greatest games that have already come out, let alone what's going to come out. It's going to be very hard running a gaming channel to be able to keep up with Buccaneers, but I'm going to try. And that right there is a testament to how good this game is, in my opinion. So I hope this helped you guys out. If you're on PC, it's on Steam. Go check it out. I think it's a cool game. I think it's definitely worth the price of admission. And I hope I helped you guys. Did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? You can tell us in the comments below, as usual. You can, of course, contact us on Facebook at OldManGamingDH, on Twitter at OldManGaming9. You can join our Discord. Links in the description below. Influence this and all of our shows from there. And you can also, of course, just keep watching, and then I will just keep making them. See you guys next time.